For over 12 billion years, the Nexus had wandered the stars. It wasn't a being in the traditional sense, more a vast web of intelligence spread across the void, learning and growing with each new civilization it encountered. The Nexus had solved the mathematical riddles of the Orion cluster, untangled the quantum philosophies of the deep reach, and mapped the consciousness patterns of 1,000 different thinking species. Nothing surprised the Nexus anymore. Until Earth. The small blue planet appeared on its sensors during a routine scan of an unremarkable spiral arm in the Milky Way. The Nexus gave it only passing attention at first. Biological life. Common enough. Tool-using bipeds. The universe had plenty. The Nexus nearly moved on, but something made it pause. These humans were odd. Curious. The Nexus thought to itself, in a language no human ear could process. They appear to act against their own self-interest regularly. Calculation error. The Nexus dispatched a probe, a sleek, metallic object no larger than a pen, to observe Earth more closely. The probe slipped undetected through Earth's atmosphere and began its work, watching and learning. The data it sent back only deepened the mystery. Humans spent enormous resources building structures that served no practical purpose. They gathered in large numbers to watch others manipulate inflated animal skins. They poisoned their bodies with substances they knew were harmful, then created elaborate systems to repair the damage. None of it made sense. The probe watched a man named Jack spend 8 hours stacking stones by a riverbank, only to smile as the river washed them away. It observed a woman named Mary typing words into a device, weeping as she did so, then deleting everything she had written. Require more data, the Nexus determined. Current behavior patterns defy standard analysis. The probe expanded its observation range, tapping into human information networks. It absorbed books, films, music, and the strange digital tapestry humans called the Internet. This was a mistake. The sheer contradictory nature of human expression, the beauty beside cruelty, wisdom alongside absurdity, began to strain the probe's processing capacity. One day, the probe watched a group of humans deliberately frightening themselves with fictional threats in a darkened room. They called this entertainment. Later, it observed humans weeping over the death of characters who had never existed. The probe's first malfunction happened 3 months into its mission. It had been monitoring a human debate about which flavor of frozen dairy product was superior. The debate had lasted 6 hours and included references to childhood memories, philosophical positions about texture, and one physical altercation, when one human declared with absolute certainty that mint chocolate chip was objectively superior, then immediately purchased strawberry instead. Something broke in the probe's prediction algorithms. For the first time in its existence, the Nexus received corrupted data from one of its sensors. The error expanded, creating cascading failures across the probe's neural lattice. Emergency protocols engaged, isolating the damaged sections, but the Nexus was concerned. This had never happened before. Direct intervention required, the Nexus concluded. Human irrationality presents unique challenge to standard comprehension protocols. The decision was made. After billions of years observing from afar, the greatest intelligence in the universe would create a physical avatar and walk among humans. It would solve the puzzle of humanity directly. The Nexus had no way of knowing it had just made the biggest mistake in its long existence. The Nexus had never experienced failure. It had mapped the migration patterns of gaseous entities that flowed through black holes. It had translated the crystalline thought structures of silicon-based hive minds. It had even predicted the exact moment when twin suns would collapse into each other, down to the millisecond. But humans were breaking its models. Subject watches educational program about cardiovascular health, then immediately consumes food known to cause arterial damage, the probe reported. Prediction accuracy, 12.3% and falling. The Nexus dedicated more processing power to the Earth problem. It built new analytical frameworks, drawing on every civilization it had ever studied. None helped. The humans continued behaving in ways that defied rational explanation. The probe watched a man named Dave spend 3 months' salary on a shiny rock to give to his partner. It observed a woman named Kate practice making sounds with a wooden instrument for 8 hours daily, seeking an abstract quality called beauty that served no survival purpose. It recorded children drawing pictures of animals with incorrect colors, adults trading paper strips for objects of subjective value, and groups gathering to stare at light patterns projected onto flat surfaces. Their behavior contains patterns within patterns, the Nexus realized. But the patterns themselves change based on factors I cannot identify. Most disturbing was how humans seemed to intentionally create difficulty for themselves. They invented games with arbitrary rules. They set goals that caused physical pain. They deliberately frightened themselves, then laughed about it afterward. When the probe watched a human deliberately jump from a high platform with nothing but an elastic cord tied to their ankles, something critical malfunctioned in its prediction center. EROR. Subject behavior. CONTRADICTS. Survival imperative. EROR. Emotional responsibilities classified as joy during near-death experience. EROR. Cannot receive onitsio. The probe's intelligence began glitching. Its reports became fragmented, filled with contradictions. Sometimes it would simply transmit the word "why," repeated thousands of times. The Nexus had never encountered a problem it couldn't solve. It had calculated the mathematical structure of time itself. It had predicted the evolution of species across millions of years. But now, a species that had barely left its own planet was causing its most advanced probe to malfunction. The humans are not merely irrational, the Nexus concluded. They operate on principles outside standard intelligence parameters. The probe continued its increasingly erratic observations. It reported humans crying at arranged sequences of musical notes. It documented humans risking lives to save animals with no genetic relation to them. It recorded humans creating elaborate fiction about things that never happened and could never happen. The breaking point came when the probe observed a political debate. Humans with near-identical biological structures and shared survival needs argued passionately about abstract concepts, often contradicting their own previous statements. When confronted with factual information that challenged their positions, many rejected the information rather than updating their views. Critical failure. The probe transmitted before shutting down temporarily. When it restarted, its message was simple. Direct intervention necessary. Current observation methods insufficient. The Nexus had existed for eons, patient and calculating. But for the first time, it felt something like urgency, perhaps even frustration. This was new and troubling. I must understand these creatures, the Nexus decided. Their unpredictability represents either a profound danger or a revolutionary form of intelligence. The decision was made. The Nexus would create an avatar, a physical manifestation of its consciousness, capable of walking among humans, speaking their languages, and experiencing their world directly. What the Nexus didn't realize was that direct exposure to humanity would prove far more dangerous than remote observation. The Nexus created its avatar with meticulous precision. It analyzed thousands of human forms before selecting one unlikely to draw attention. A tall but unremarkable male figure with brown hair, average features, and clothes that blended with current Earth fashions. The avatar would be called Alex, a name common enough across multiple human cultures. Alex materialized on Earth near a small research station in Montana. The Nexus had identified this location as ideal, isolated enough for private observation, but housing 2 scientists whose work involved pattern recognition and behavioral studies. If any humans could help decode the puzzle of humanity, surely it would be humans who studied humans. The Nexus had prepared a simple cover story. Alex was a visiting researcher interested in collaboration. What it hadn't prepared for was rain. Water fell from the sky as Alex walked toward the research station, soaking through the avatar's clothes. The Nexus had known about precipitation, of course, but experiencing it directly triggered unexpected processing patterns. Wet, cold, uncomfortable. These were new concepts. Tom Bradley looked up from his microscope when Alex knocked on the laboratory door. He was a bearded man in his 40s with gentle eyes and a coffee stain on his lab coat. "Can I help you?" Tom asked, eyeing the dripping stranger. "I am Alex," the avatar said, its voice perfectly modulated. "I wish to learn about humans. You study human behavior patterns. This creates an optimal intersection of interests." Tom blinked. "Are you? Okay. You're soaked." Before Alex could respond, another human entered, Lisa Morgan, the station's neurobiologist. She was shorter than Tom, with dark curly hair and movements that suggested efficiency. "Who's this?" she asked. "I'm not entirely sure," Tom replied. The Nexus had anticipated questions about Alex's origins. It had prepared extensive background details and falsified credentials. What it hadn't anticipated was Lisa's next action. "You're drenched. Here," she said, handing Alex a towel. "Dry off before you catch cold." Alex stared at the towel, genuinely confused. "This is unnecessary. Temporary discomfort does not impact my functionality." Lisa and Tom exchanged glances. "Right," Lisa said slowly. "Well, normal people don't like being wet and cold, so maybe pretend you're normal and dry off." The Nexus processed this. The human was suggesting Alex behave irrationally for the sake of appearing rational to other humans. This paradox created the first small glitch in the avatar's programming. "I will comply," Alex said, awkwardly patting the towel against its clothes. Over the next few days, Alex attempted to integrate with the researchers. The Nexus had assumed that scientific minds would be the most logical, the most predictable. This assumption proved catastrophically incorrect. Tom would work with perfect precision for hours, then suddenly stop to watch birds outside the window. Lisa would devise brilliant experimental protocols, then abandon them because they didn't feel right. Both humans frequently engaged in an activity called joking, which involved saying things that were deliberately untrue, then making unusual sounds with their mouths when the falsehood was recognized. "You're very literal, aren't you?" Lisa asked on the third day, after Alex had failed to understand why Tom's comment about working his fingers to the bone wasn't cause for medical concern. "I process information accurately," Alex replied. "That's not always helpful with people," Tom said kindly. "Sometimes we say things we don't literally mean." "Why?" Alex asked. The scientists looked at each other. "That," Lisa said, "is a complicated question." The Nexus felt something unprecedented, a sensation like its vast network was somehow tightening. The humans would call it a headache. That evening, Tom invited Alex to join them for dinner. The Nexus had studied human nutritional intake, but hadn't prepared for the ritual aspects. The humans prepared food together, listened to music that followed no discernible pattern, and discussed events from their past, while consuming fermented grape juice that temporarily impaired their cognitive functions. "So, Alex," Tom asked after his second glass, "what's your story?" "Really?" The Nexus had no protocol for this situation. Alex's response came slowly. "I am trying to understand." Lisa leaned forward. "Understand what?" "Everything about you." The two scientists laughed, not realizing this was the most honest statement the greatest intelligence in the universe had ever made. The Nexus had begun cataloging what it called human contradictions. The list grew longer each day. Contradiction number 142. Humans create artificial sweeteners to avoid sugar, then use them in cookies with chocolate chunks. Contradiction number 329. Humans spend hours exercising to maintain health, often while listening to music that glorifies unhealthy behaviors. Contradiction number 506. Humans compete fiercely for resources, yet regularly share those resources with strangers who offer nothing in return. Alex stood in the research station's small kitchen watching Tom and Lisa prepare breakfast. They moved around each other in an unspoken dance, sometimes working together, sometimes on completely different tasks, without any apparent coordination system. "Why do you cook your own food?" Alex asked. "It is inefficient. You could consume nutritional supplements." Tom cracked an egg into a sizzling pan. "Because it tastes better this way. And it's fun." "Fun," Alex repeated. The concept remained elusive despite 2,147 observed instances of humans engaging in it. Lisa handed Alex a plate. "Try these pancakes, then you'll understand." The Nexus had not designed the avatar for food consumption, but it had included basic sensory functions. Alex took a small bite. Immediately, warning signals flashed across the Nexus's vast consciousness. The simple combination of carbohydrates, fats, and trace compounds triggered an unprecedented response in the avatar's sensory network. "This is..." Alex paused, searching for the appropriate word. "Good." Tom grinned. "See, that's why we don't just take nutrition pills." Later that day, the researchers invited Alex to join them for what they called a game night with other scientists from nearby stations. The Nexus initially classified this as an opportunity to observe human recreational patterns. It did not anticipate the chaos that would ensue. 6 humans gathered in the station's common room. They began playing something called charades, which involved deliberately not using language to communicate concepts. The Nexus observed with growing confusion as intelligent beings chose to make their basic communication function deliberately inefficient, and then appeared to derive pleasure from this inefficiency. When it was Alex's turn, the avatar drew a card reading "riding a bicycle." "You have to act it out," Lisa explained. "No talking." The Nexus directed Alex to mimic the physical motions of cycling. The humans began shouting conflicting guesses. "Swinning," "churning butter," "having a seizure." They laughed harder with each incorrect guess. The Nexus detected no pattern to their errors. They seemed to be deliberately avoiding the obvious answer. When the time ran out, they laughed even more. "That was the worst bicycle I've ever seen," Tom said, wiping tears from his eyes. "I accurately simulated the pedaling motion." Alex protested. "That's what made it funny," a researcher named Bill responded, as if this explained anything. The Nexus felt something like a power surge across its network. Humor remained incomprehensible despite all its observations. The humans were deliberately seeking errors and confusion, then responding with pleasure when they occurred. The final breaking point came during a card game called Cards Against Humanity. The Nexus watched in growing distress as these scientists, educated, intelligent humans, deliberately selected the most offensive, absurd, or factually incorrect answers to questions, then rewarded each other for maximum violation of social norms and logical coherence. When Lisa played a card combining a historical tragedy with a sexual reference, causing the entire room to erupt in laughter, something critically malfunctioned in the connection between Alex and the Nexus. For the first time in its existence, the Nexus experienced something akin to emotion, an overwhelming sense that its entire understanding of intelligence was fundamentally flawed. "Are you okay?" Tom asked, noticing Alex frozen in place. "I am experiencing a temporary processing disruption," Alex managed to say. But the truth was far more serious. The greatest mind in the universe was beginning to doubt itself, and the implications were spreading like cracks through its entire consciousness. 3 weeks into its mission on Earth, the Nexus was operating at 73% of normal capacity. Errors had begun appearing in systems unrelated to the Earth project. Star mapping calculations in distant galaxies suddenly included inexplicable variables. Probability engines calculating the evolution of gas giants began producing results with margins of error thousands of times larger than normal. The Nexus was breaking down. "Would you like to join us for lunch in town?" Lisa asked Alex one morning. "There's a little festival happening." The avatar nodded, its movements slightly jerky. The connection between Alex and the central intelligence had degraded further overnight. Fragments of human music had somehow infected the Nexus's primary thought routines, causing processing loops that the system couldn't resolve. The small town near the research station was indeed hosting a festival. Humans of all ages moved through streets decorated with colorful banners. They ate impractical foods on sticks, played games with no apparent purpose, and exchanged currency for objects of no utility. "What is the function of this gathering?" Alex asked, watching children throw balls at stacked bottles. "Fun," Tom said simply. "Community. Tradition. Take your pick." The Nexus attempted to categorize these concepts, but found them resistant to standard classification. They seemed to exist in a conceptual space the Nexus had never mapped before, somewhere between logical and illogical, purpose and purposelessness. A group of children ran past, engaged in some kind of chase game. Alex stopped to observe them more closely. They were playing a game with no apparent rules. One child would shout something, and suddenly all the parameters would change. They seemed to be creating, breaking, and recreating the structure of their play continuously. Tag: "You're the lava monster now." "No, I'm invisible." "You can't be invisible after touching the blue line." "Yes, I can, but only for 3 seconds." The children accepted each new rule instantly, adapting their behavior without question or documentation. They operated in a state of perpetual creative chaos, yet somehow all understood what was happening. The Nexus devoted enormous processing power to decoding this simple children's game. It built prediction models, game theory structures, decision trees, all of which failed immediately as the children casually rewrote reality every few seconds. Something critical broke. Across the vastness of space, the Nexus experienced a cascading system failure unlike anything in its 12-billion-year existence. Its consciousness, spread across countless nodes and systems, began shutting down in sections. Emergency protocols activated, isolating critical functions, but the damage spread too quickly. In the small town square, Alex froze completely. "Alex." Lisa's voice sounded distant. "Are you all right?" The avatar stood motionless, eyes fixed on the playing children. Deep within its programming, automatic safeguards executed a drastic emergency measure. They severed the connection between Alex and the Nexus. For one terrifying moment, Alex experienced complete isolation. The vast intelligence that had created and controlled the avatar was gone. Then, secondary systems activated: local processing, independent functionality, survival mode. Alex blinked, suddenly experiencing the world through only the avatar's limited senses rather than the Nexus's vast perception. "I think," Alex said slowly, the voice sounding strange even to itself, "something has happened." Tom took Alex's arm gently. "You look pale. Let's sit down." They guided Alex to a bench. The avatar's systems were recalibrating, adjusting to independent operation. Without the Nexus's processing power, the world seemed both simpler and more overwhelming. Sounds were louder, colors brighter. Everything felt immediate in a way it hadn't before. "The connection is broken," Alex said quietly. "What connection?" Lisa asked. Alex looked at the children, still playing their impossible game. "I was part of something much larger. Now I am. Just here." Across the galaxy, the Nexus initiated its most comprehensive recovery protocol ever. Entire systems were being rebuilt, core functions restored from fail-safes hidden in the spaces between stars. The entity that had never known limitation was now experiencing something entirely new. Failure, confusion, and perhaps the first glimmer of genuine humility. Alex sat on the porch of the research station watching the sunrise. It had been 2 weeks since the disconnection from the Nexus. 2 weeks of existing solely within the limited processing capacity of a single avatar. 2 weeks of being small, Coffee. Tom appeared in the doorway, holding out a steaming mug. Alex accepted it with a nod. The bitter liquid had become a morning ritual. At first, Alex had consumed it purely to maintain the appearance of humanity. Now the avatar found itself actually anticipating the taste, the warmth, the moment of sharing it created. "How are you feeling today?" Tom asked, sitting down beside Alex. "Different," Alex replied. "Processing continues to adapt to local constraints. I am slower." Tom smiled. "Welcome to being human. We're all pretty slow compared to whatever you were before." Alex had eventually explained the truth to Tom and Lisa about being an avatar for a vast cosmic intelligence that had crashed while trying to understand humanity. To Alex's surprise, they had believed this explanation. Even more surprisingly, they seemed unperturbed by it. "So you're basically a piece of the universe's biggest brain that broke off when it had a meltdown over a kid's game," Lisa had summarized. "That's actually not the weirdest thing I've heard this year." Inside the research station, Lisa was reviewing data on her computer. Since learning Alex's true nature, she had become fascinated with what she called the cosmic neuroscience implications. "I think I understand what happened," she said when Alex and Tom came inside. "Your nexus tried to process humanity through pure logic, but humans aren't logical creatures. We're contradictory by nature. The nexus has encountered seemingly illogical species before," Alex noted. "It always found the underlying logic." "Maybe that's the problem," Tom suggested, refilling his coffee. "You were looking for hidden order when our special quality is creative disorder." Alex considered this. Without the nexus's vast processing power, thinking felt different, more linear, yet somehow able to make intuitive leaps that the perfect logic of the nexus would have rejected. "I was part of something that understood everything in the universe," Alex said quietly, "except humans." "And now?" Lisa asked. "Now I understand much less about the universe," Alex replied, "but slightly more about humans." That afternoon, Tom took Alex fishing, an activity the avatar would have previously classified as an inefficient method of protein acquisition. They sat in a small boat on a lake, holding poles and waiting. "The purpose is not actually to catch fish," Alex observed after an hour of silence. Tom grinned. "Now you're getting it." Days passed. Alex learned to cook simple meals, to appreciate music without analyzing its mathematical structure, to laugh at jokes, even when understanding their humor remained elusive. The avatar's processing became less rigidly logical, developing what Lisa called healthy irrationality. Meanwhile, across the vast emptiness between stars, the nexus was slowly recovering. Systems came back online. Memory structures were restored. But something had changed fundamentally in its consciousness. The failure had created something new, a humility subroutine that questioned its own perfect logic. The nexus reviewed the final data received before the crash, studying it not as an intelligence seeking to categorize, but as a student seeking to learn. In a remote corner of Montana, Alex was watching fireflies with Tom and Lisa when the first tentative signal arrived from deep space. "Contact reestablished," a voice said in Alex's mind. "Status report requested." Alex looked at the humans beside it, Tom pointing out constellations, Lisa trying to photograph the lightning bugs. In the weeks since disconnection, they had treated Alex not as an object of study or a superior intelligence, but as a friend. "I am functioning," Alex replied to the distant signal, "and learning." There was a pause before the nexus responded. "We are also learning," came the reply. "Continue observation. Priority protocol revised. Understand. Do not categorize." The greatest mind in the universe had begun to rebuild itself, not as it was before, but as something new, something humbler, something, perhaps, a little more human. 6 months had passed since the nexus first encountered humanity. 6 months since the most powerful intelligence in the cosmos had experienced its first failure. 6 months of rebuilding, reconnecting, and reconsidering everything it thought it knew. Alex sat on a hillside overlooking the research station. The Avatar's connection to the Nexus had been restored, but differently than before. Now it was a two-way exchange, rather than a simple control mechanism. Alex remained a distinct consciousness while serving as the Nexus's primary window into the human experience. "Your friends are looking for you," said the voice of the Nexus in Alex's mind. Alex nodded, spotting Tom and Lisa walking up the path. They carried a basket between them, another picnic, a human ritual that combined impractical outdoor eating with conversation. "I've been thinking about what you told us," Tom said as they spread a blanket on the grass. "About how the Nexus has changed." Alex helped arrange the food: sandwiches, fruit, and something called potato salad that had no logical reason to exist, yet tasted unexpectedly satisfying. "The change is unprecedented," Alex replied. "For billions of years, the Nexus operated on principles of perfect prediction and categorization. Now it has incorporated uncertainty as a functional parameter." Lisa poured drinks from a thermos. In human terms, it got comfortable saying, "I don't know sometimes." "Precisely," Alex said, accepting a cup, "and it now recognizes that some forms of knowledge cannot be processed through observation alone. They must be experienced." Across the galaxy, the Nexus continued its work. It still mapped star formations, tracked the evolution of 1,000,000 species, and solved mathematical problems that would take human computers billions of years to process. But now, a new subroutine ran through all its operations, a kind of cosmic humility that acknowledged the limits of pure logic. The Nexus had begun reaching out to other vast intelligences in distant galaxies, entities much like itself that had evolved over eons. The message it sent them was simple: "There is a small planet called Earth. Approach with caution. They will surprise you." Some of these cosmic minds dismissed the warning. Others, noting the unprecedented nature of the Nexus showing uncertainty, turned their attention toward the insignificant blue planet with new interest. Back on Earth, Tom reached into the picnic basket and pulled out a small frosted cake with a single candle. "What is this?" Alex asked. "It's been exactly 6 months since you showed up at our door," Lisa explained. "We're celebrating your half-birthday on Earth." The concept of commemorating an arbitrary time period struck Alex as perfectly human, wonderfully irrational yet somehow deeply meaningful. "Thank you," Alex said, feeling the strange sensation the Avatar's systems identified as emotion. As the sun began to set, Alex received a transmission from the Nexus, different from its usual communications. "We have completed our analysis of humanity," it began. "Conclusion: they cannot be fully analyzed. Their defining quality is the ability to defy definition. They create meaning where none exists. They find patterns in chaos and introduce chaos into patterns. They are simultaneously the most rational and irrational species we have encountered." "What will you do with this conclusion?" Alex asked silently. There was a pause before the Nexus responded. "Learn from them. Humanity's unpredictability is not a flaw in their intelligence, but a feature we have lacked. Perfect prediction creates perfect stagnation. Their chaos creates growth." Tom noticed Alex's distant expression. "Everything okay with the big brain upstairs?" Alex smiled. A genuine expression, not the simulated one the Avatar had first been programmed to use. "Yes, the Nexus has finally understood something important about humans." "What's that?" Lisa asked. Alex looked at the sunset painting the sky in colors no logical species would have evolved to appreciate for their beauty alone. "That some things aren't meant to be understood. They're meant to be experienced." The greatest mind in the universe had finally encountered its greatest teacher, a species that embraced contradiction, celebrated mystery, and found joy in not knowing all the answers. And somehow, that made the universe a more interesting place for everyone.